They were told their language was dangerous, that their culture was backwards, that their children needed to forget where they came from. And then, when war came, the same government came asking for help.
Of course they did. The Navajo code talkers didn't just speak in code, they spoke in survival. They carried the weight of ancestors, of silence, of sacrifice. And they did it for a country that still didn't even see them as equals.
Their mothers watched them leave, boys who weren't allowed to speak their own names in school, and they came back as heroes, to a nation that never said thank you.
This episode is for the women who kept the radios on and the engines running, and the stories alive. Mothers, messengers, code makers. You won't find most of them in your kid's history book, but you'll find them here.
We're listening to Moms Against the Machine. I'm Chelsea, book smuggler, chaos coordinator, and the mom who's raising two tiny humans to question everything that they've been told.
And I'm Jen, former church girl turned full-blown resistor, raising teenagers, asking the hard questions, and screenshotting bigotry.
Last week, we kicked off part 1 of our World War II special. We unpacked how fascism doesn't show up waving a red flag. It creeps in through laws, fear, and silence. We talked about how women were called to serve and then told to sit down and smile when the war was over.
And now, in part 2, we're telling the stories that barely made the textbooks, if they even did at all. The Navajo warriors whose language was banned in the classrooms but saved American lives in the Pacific. The teenage girls designing aircraft blueprints while their brothers shipped off to war, and the women who turned radios into weapons, fighting fascism with nothing but their voices.
Because the real war stories, they're messy, they're quiet, and more often than not, they're told in whispers by women holding it all together at home.
So we're going to turn up the volume and get into it.
There's a kind of violence that doesn't leave blood in the street. It's quieter, slower, and it comes in the form of policies, promises, and progress reports. And for Native families in this country, it came in the form of erasure.
Okay, let's back up. Before we talk about the codebreakers, military glory, we have to talk about their boarding schools. For over a century, the U.S. government and Christian missionaries stole Native children from their homes and placed them in so-called Indian boarding schools.
The purpose wasn't education, it was extermination, not only of bodies, but of culture, language, memory, and identity. They cut their hair, gave them new names, beat them for speaking their mother tongues. Kill the Indian, save the man. That was the motto.
This wasn't ancient history. The last federally run boarding school closed in 1996. To put that in context, I was in high school. Some of the Navajo code talkers were survivals of these schools. So when World War II broke out and the U.S. military needed help, it turned to the very people that it had spent all those generations trying to silence.
You know, the fact that you were in high school in 1996 really bothers me. No. Not for that reason. But the apartheid fell in, 92 or 94? Was either the year before or the year after I was born? So you would have been in high school when apartheid fell. And we're bringing over refugees from South Africa.
Yeah.
That
were
ironic. Literally, they're your age.
Yeah. Yeah. But I
didn't
even hear about that in high school. I never did.
I don't think I barely heard about the apartheid, and I've had to seriously study it, but I got very into it. So I don't know. Do you know who Trevor Noah is?
Yes.
So I read his biography, and it's incredible. But it is so sad. Just he literally lived his life illegally in South Africa. If they were walking down the street and police came, any family or friends that were with him would literally ditch him.
That's
because
so
if they were
sad.
seen with him, then they would get arrested.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I have the book. I was you're more than welcome to borrow it.
Yeah, I would love to.
And then also if you want my Thurgood Marshall book, because that one made me cry constantly.
Oh my gosh. These books always make me cry.
Yeah. Okay. Back on track. The irony should break your heart. The U.S. government asked Navajo men to use a language they were once punished for speaking, to build the most secure battlefield code in modern history. And they did. Over 400 Navajo Marines developed a code so precise, so fast, and so indecipherable that it saved thousands of American lives, especially in the Pacific Theater.
They transmitted the movements of troops, the coordinates, rescue missions, and strategic commands faster than any machine. The Japanese never cracked it, not once. And not even when they captured Navajo soldiers, because it wasn't just a code, it was their culture, rhythm, sound, and it could not be replicated by any outsiders.
They saved us, let's be clear. The success of Iwo Jima, code talkers. The survival of isolated units, code talkers. The speed of intelligence relayed under fire, code talkers. But when they came home, they were not celebrated.
Yeah, they were silenced yet again. Their program was actually classified until 1968. Many of the code talkers never even got to tell their stories while they were still alive. They returned to poverty, systemic racism, and a country that still never saw them as equals.
Some couldn't vote, some couldn't buy property off reservation. Many returned to families still reeling from trauma. Boarding schools, forced sterilizations, broken treaties, stolen children, and yet they had served with honor, with brilliance, and with sacrifice.
And today, that legacy continues because the violence has actually never stopped. Native women are still being abducted, trafficked, and murdered at staggering rates all across North America, with almost zero media coverage and very little law enforcement response. We call them missing like it's a mystery, but it's not.
This is ongoing genocide. Corporations dig pipelines through sacred land. States suppress tribal IDs and voting rights. Tribes are denied access to clean water, healthcare, and infrastructure, especially with the continuing resolution that just passed and the new budget in Congress waiting. Children still go missing, women still vanish, and memory is still treated like a threat.
But the code talkers taught us that language is survival, memory is resistance, and sometimes the most powerful weapon in the world is the voice that they try to silence.
So we remember the boarding school survivors who never got justice, the mothers who whispered stories in secret so their children wouldn't forget who they were, and the Navajo Marines who turned a language nearly lost into the code that won a war.
We will say their names and tell their stories because remembrance is how we break the pattern, and silence is how it repeats itself.
This next story is personal, not to me, but to a family member that's very close to me. During the war, she helped build one of the most iconic planes in the Navy's fleet. After the war, she quietly reshaped American science. And in between, she became a friend to my aunt, another strong woman who knew what it meant to serve her country without ever being handed the spotlight.
Her name was Betty Maskett. She was a North Carolina mountain girl who went from building rubber band airplanes to line inspecting the SB-2C Helldiver. And if you've ever walked through the Smithsonian's Air and Space Museum, then you've seen her work hanging from the ceiling.
She wasn't a name in a textbook. She wasn't in the parades or on the posters, but she helped win the war, and then she helped rebuild the country. This is her story. Betty Isabel Henson Maskett. She was born in the Great Smoky Mountains of North Carolina in 1923, in a little town called Cullowhee. She was the youngest of 4 kids, full of curiosity, and as her family would say, just enough mischief.
That's a very interesting word because the stories go that she once tried to chew plug tobacco from her dad's general store and got so buzzed from the nicotine that she almost fell in the river. But she did get in trouble for that one, of course. But she was already a girl, very young, who was asking questions, trying things, and she didn't ask for permission.
Betty went off to Western Carolina Teachers College, where she was one of the few women taking math and science classes, and smarter than most of the guys by her own account. But when war broke out and men disappeared overseas, she did something bolder than most women were ever told they could do. She applied to become an aeronautical engineer.
That's pretty dear to my heart because before McKenna wanted to do nursing, she thought about doing
The engineering.
aerospace engineering, yeah. So she decided against it, but it's still something that's very interesting to her. So
Eva's going to end up in something with planes. She's been taking stuff apart and putting it back together since she was
That was McKenna. That was
yeah.
McKenna. Yeah. So the Curtiss-Wright Corporation had launched a program to train women to design warplanes. And Betty, who had never been away from home, packed her bags and went to Purdue University to study engineering, machine shop, and aerodynamics.
She didn't love the drafting classes, but she thrived in math, science, and even built her own hammer from a steel on a lathe. In one class, she designed a rubber band-powered airplane. It flew. And after 10 months of intense study, she graduated and was placed at a Curtiss-Wright plant in Columbus, Ohio. There, she became a line inspector on the SB-2C Helldiver, the very Navy dive bomber now suspended from the ceiling of the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum.
That plane flew. That plane flew.
So tired.
Get through it, Jen.
I've already taken my melatonin and my migraine medicine, so Anna
White
a drink.
We might have to abandon ship. This needs to be about 3 times as strong as it is, because I am so tired. Okay. That plane flew critical missions in the Pacific, but like so many women of her generation, Betty's work wasn't immortalized. And when the war ended, she was thanked with a pat on the head and a closed door.
She returned to North Carolina, finished her degree in chemistry and math, and later earned a master's in analytical chemistry. She married physicist Victor Maskett, raised 2 daughters, and when cancer took her husband in 1966, Betty did what women do when everything falls apart. She held the house together, she got a job, and she kept going.
She worked as a chemist at the NIH. She didn't just take a desk job. She rose to become the head chemist of the cholesterol lab. Later, she served as scientific review administrator, evaluating and managing research that would go on to impact public health policy nationwide.
That dive bomber might hang in the Smithsonian, but Betty's real legacy, it's also in every heart scan, every stroke prevention program, every discovery made possible by women like her, quietly, relentlessly doing the work. You know, she didn't even tell anybody until she was in her 90s that she even worked on these planes.
Really?
Anybody close to her?
So
I believe
they
it was
just
like her
hung
90s or
up
80s.
there, and
It hung up there. She
Oh
did
my
all of the work
gosh.
on it, but I don't think she really got into telling anybody that she did all
Yeah.
that work. I was like, that's really cool that you were
I
one of the
know.
few people chosen to do that and
It
to
would have
hold it
been
down in the
nice
factory.
to have been able to celebrate her while she was
She
still
has a
alive.
book written. So the women that worked with her, there's somebody that wrote a book on them.
Mm-hmm.
So they have that to kind of, but once that book was being written, like she went out to lunch with my aunt and her friends. She's like, oh yeah, they're writing a book about me. And they're like, about what? She was like, oh, all of this stuff. They're like, why didn't you tell us any of that?
Know. She's like, oh, just another day.
Yeah. She's like,
just another day being a badass, you know. So she passed away in 2021, just shy of 100 years old, not with medals or headlines, but a full life behind her, and a Helldiver that's still flying overhead in a museum full of names that rarely say it out loud. So we're saying her name, Betty Maskett, engineer, mother, chemist, badass.
And proof that when women build something, they don't just build machines, they build legacies. You've heard of Rosie the Riveter. You've seen the posters, the bandana, the flexed arm. But what about the women who fought with silence, ink, and coded messages? Women who didn't need a factory to fight the war. Just a radio, a pen, and a perfectly timed lie.
This is the story of Betty McIntosh, reporter, spy, propaganda writer, and the woman who helped manipulate one of the most powerful tools of World War II, belief.
The protagonist to Caroline Levitt. Betty was born in 1915 in Washington, D.C., but she grew up in Hawaii. She was fluent in Japanese, smart, observant, curious. She became a journalist, covering news in Asia, including the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong. But after Pearl Harbor, journalism wasn't enough. She wanted to fight back.
She wound up joining the Office of Strategic Services, which was the wartime predecessor to the CIA. And unlike many women at the time who were kept to clerical roles, Betty was placed on a team that handled morale destruction operations. In case you didn't know what that means, think psychological warfare.
Because we all know men are really easy to fool. She did a lot more work than she needed to, I'm guessing.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, just a lot of misandry over here. She wrote fake news stories and created scripts for entire radio shows meant to be picked up by Japanese troops and civilians. Her mission was to confuse, demoralize, and disrupt. She didn't need a gun. She had disinformation. One of her most famous projects, creating a fictional Japanese woman radio host designed to sow despair among the troops.
She flipped the script on what people feared the most. So when Japanese troops were trained to resist American soldiers, they were deeply vulnerable to shame, fear of abandonment, and the idea that their empire was collapsing. Betty crafted broadcasts that preyed upon those fears, slowly, methodically, and without any fanfare. She knew that war wasn't just about weapons. It was about controlling the narrative.
She also worked with Moral Operations, a covert branch of the OSS tasked with developing black propaganda. False material designed to look like it came from Japan's own military sources. This includes forged leaflets, phony newspapers, fake casualty lists, and even letters from home that seemed to show that Japan was already losing.
That's so diabolical.
I know.
She was very precise. She was careful, and she actually had to be, because if she was caught, she would have been executed as a spy. So even with that danger, she stayed in the work after the war and then wound up marrying fellow OSS officer Charles F. McIntosh and continued her career in intelligence.
It wasn't until 1947 that she could even talk about what she did. And even then, barely anyone was listening. She eventually published a memoir called Undercover Girl, but it read more like a novel than a confession, because women in her line of work, they were trained to disappear.
The irony is, today we're still dealing with the very tools that Betty used. Fake stories, covert broadcasts, carefully curated fear. Only now it's happening on our feeds, in our school board meetings, in our state legislation. Propaganda isn't just about big lies. It's about repetition, control, a little truth sprinkled into a bigger manipulation. KKK Caroline, anyone?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, also, Lance Gooden. Like,
Yeah.
They use the same buzzwords on all their posts.
Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Yes.
Lauren Boebert,
Yes.
all of the other awful MAGA men.
Did you see that Nancy Mace showed her nudie photos? Like she on the house floor or something. Yes. She was like, look, these were taken of me without my consent, but now I'm going to show them to the world.
Bro, that's publicly broadcasted.
she
That
knows.
is publicly broadcasted, and she showed everybody her nudes.
I mean, I think it was like,
does anybody even want to see that?
Silhouette, but it was like, look at my body.
Still.
Like, look at my body. In this photo I did not want taken publicly.
What a pick me.
Yeah, very pick me behavior. I see your hand in my podcast.
Who is it?
Clint.
Oh.
Are you having a popcorn break? Oh, what are you eating? Oh, dumplings. Dumplings are even better.
That's even better. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's way better than a popcorn
way better.
break.
I love dumplings. Sure.
God, me too. We have all kinds of dumplings at our house.
Just like Betty knew, the first battle is for the mind. She lived to be 100 years old, a quiet legend, a woman who once broadcasted fear into enemy lines and outwitted generals with a fountain pen.
Have you ever noticed that all these badass ladies live to be so old?
I was literally thinking about that.
I'm like, oh my God.
Because Virginia Hall was...
They outlived like 3 husbands.
Probably wasn't hard to do with the amount of nuclear radiation that was happening at that time.
Right. But I noticed, I'm like, oh, this lady lived to be like way older than her husband.
And it's probably because they died so young.
Yeah.
They had to marry 20 years older, so they got a good 20 years in the last bit of their life without men.
That's actually true. Yes.
Female roommates.
So while one Betty built the machines that flew over the battlefields, this Betty slipped her words underneath them, and not with permission, glory, but with intention.
Because you don't need a bomb to break a system. Sometimes all it takes is a whisper in the right ear at the right moment on the right frequency. They called it the Good War, the war that saved democracy, the war that brought America together. But for the Black Americans who fought it, there was nothing simple about fighting for a country that didn't fight for you. Not even a little bit.
More than 1 million Black Americans served in World War II in uniform, danger, and service. Most of them were still segregated by law, humiliated by policy, and sent into jobs that were deemed too dirty or too dangerous for white soldiers. Let's start with the Tuskegee Airmen, because we all know the name, but we rarely know the truth behind it.
And just for clarification, for future episodes, we're going to hit all of these again, because we know that these are just very short introductions into very important institutions that have happened in our lives. And the Tuskegee Airmen and the 6.888 specifically, and the Navajo Code Talkers, all very, very important, and things that we definitely want to hit again in an expanded episode where we talk about just them and the services that those led to.
I mean, there's been movies and books and books and books on books on World War II. It's hard to cover everything in a
but this is only our 6th episode, so we're trying to we'll summarize a lot of stuff. We're gonna circle back.
Yeah. As Jen Psaki would say, we'll circle back.
This makes me really happy, though, because even I just read a Tuskegee Airmen book, and she got bored by the end of it because it was a chapter book with barely any pictures.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, let's read it. And she was like, can we do a picture book, Mom? But then she'd pull out Harriet Tubman or Billie Jean King or something else. I'm like, okay. Or
Okay,
at
this
least
is
we
fine.
still have our history book. Because my thing is one fun book, one history book, and one science book. And that's typically what we read in a night. Lately, it's been a lot of fun books because I've been tired. But okay. So they were called the Red Tails. Pilots, bombardiers, navigators, and mechanics, trained separately, paid less, sabotaged by their own military leadership. Some commanders tried to ground them completely. Others sent them into missions hoping they'd fail. But they didn't. They flew with distinction, more than 15,000 sorties, nearly 300 enemy aircraft destroyed, and fewer bomber losses than any other fighter group.
Any other fighter group, let that sink in. Because when they came home, they weren't considered heroes. They were threats. Threats to segregation, threats to the myth of white superiority, and threats to the lie that America had done right by all of its soldiers.
The Red Tails actually helped destroy a massive factory that helped make like the tanks and everything, and they're barely ever credited with the amount of work that they put in there. They lost at least one plane that day, um, which is one of their first it was one of the first big losses that they had. It wasn't one of the first, but it was a big one, and they're not even credited with it. Like it was a German
Sad.
factory for tanks and stuff. I think the white battalions that were with them that they paired with, even though they were the ones doing all the maneuvers, got the credit for it.
Of course they did.
Now let's talk about the labor battalions, the ones nobody honors, the men who cleared landmines with their feet, who ran fuel and ammo across battlefields, who were sent in to pick up the pieces after white units moved forward. They were considered expendable. They were told they were lucky to serve, even as their assignments killed them.
It's just insane to me. Please serve our country, even though we don't respect you or think you're an actual full human.
Well, you've seen the Mexican veteran that self-deported and threw all of his medals off a bridge on his way out.
I
In the
didn't
past
see
like
that.
couple weeks. Yeah.
I mean, I would feel completely affronted.
I don't know. I think if you've served in the military, you get a pass.
Agree.
Immediately.
Agree.
The
Because
fact
you
that there's
obviously
no
love our
path.
country enough to serve for our country.
The fact that there would be no path to citizenship for somebody and they feel like they have to leave the country.
I agree. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the 6888 Post Battalion, an all-black, all-female unit of 855 women. Their job was to restore the flow of mail to millions of troops, letters from mom, wives, and children, because no one fights well when they feel forgotten about.
When they arrived in Europe, the backlog was so bad mail was rotting. Rodents nested in unopened bags of rotting food. Some letters had been sitting there for 2 years. 6888 ended up in unheated warehouses and worked 24/7 in 3 shifts, sorting 17 million letters in 6 months flat. That's 65,000 pieces of mail a day.
That's insane. That is crazy. That's a crazy amount. It's crazy work. But the story doesn't end there, because when they were back home, they were met with silence. There was no parade, medals, or place in American history.
They weren't allowed in the same USO clubs. They couldn't get their GI Bill benefits. They couldn't get their GI Bill benefits processed in the same offices, and some came home to find that their children were being taught a version of the war that left them out entirely.
I would be so mad.
Mm-hmm.
Even today, Black veterans face the highest rates of denial for disability claims. They face higher risks of homelessness, poverty, PTSD without support, and medical neglect. That is systemic racism that they fought in 1943 that still lives in the VA.
But they kept showing up, kept fighting, kept holding the line, because that's what patriotism really looks like. Not the flag waving, not the bumper stickers, but the decision to give your country everything, even when it gives you nothing back.
Okay, so today we are going to say their names. The Tuskegee Airmen, the 6888 Battalion, the Black Port Battalions, the Mine Clearers, the Truck Convoys, the nurses, the cooks, the medics, and engineers. They didn't carry rifles, they carried the burden of being invisible.
But we see them now. We remember them not as side notes, but as essential. And we will talk about them again, not as first, but as pillars. And not just for what they did back then, but for what they're still owed today. We've spent this whole episode talking about memory, about voices erased from the story of World War II. But erasure isn't a history problem, it's a now problem.
Right now, all across America, the government is deleting people from the military, from the internet, from schools, history books, and public offices, from the national identity. Let's call it what it is, a systemic purge.
In March, NPR broke the story. Federal agencies are actively scrubbing their websites, removing photos, stories, and mentions of women, LGBTQ plus Americans, people of color, the Enola Gay. Pages honoring Navajo code talkers were deleted. Profiles of Black war heroes and Japanese American battalions scrubbed. The Air Force even took down a story celebrating 10 women stealth bomber pilots because of an executive order demanding race and gender neutrality.
NASA also told staff to remove anything that was featuring women, and the Pentagon marked 26,000 photos, mostly featuring women and BIPOC service members, for deletion. So let's just let that sink in. They're not rewriting history. They're digitally burning it.
Historian Alessio Ponzio said it best. If you erase the memory, we really forget the people. It's an act of violence. Subtle, but powerful, and we're watching it happen in real time.
The Supreme Court gave Trump the green light to enforce his ban on transgender military members. This time, it goes even further than the 2017 ban because it discharges active duty trans soldiers. Soldiers already serving, already deployed, already proven.
Like Navy pilot Emily Schilling, who's flown over 60 combat missions, booted. Not because of conduct, not because of readiness, because she's transgender. The administration claims that this is about a medical disqualification. The court let that lie stand.
But the truth is very obvious. It's not about readiness, it's about prejudice. When you combine that with the erasure of queer figures from history pages and federal websites, that is not policy, it's targeted removal.
Then came May 9th. The Trump administration, led by VA Secretary, I don't want to say his name, Pete Hegseth, ended affirmative action at every U.S. military service academy. West Point, the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, all now at risk of being denied opportunity due to race or background when selecting future officers. Let's think about just who that benefits for a second.
At one point, McKenna wanted to go to the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, well,
So
glad you didn't.
I know what it, yeah, I know. But I also know what it involves. And if someone wants to go, how hard it is, because you have to get a congressman or like a representative, someone to recommend you that's in the Senate or the House of Representatives. And they can only recommend so many people for like
That's pretty cool,
a
though.
period of time. Yeah. So just imagine they're just going to stop writing those letters for people of color, basically. But it's not just a pipeline issue. It's an officer corps purge. It's an engineered return to an all-white command structure that they want to call merit.
Merit in a system built on exclusion, where Black and Native cadets are already underrepresented, where military strength is supposed to come from cohesion, and cohesion comes from representation. This isn't about unity, it's about control.
And while we're watching the systems get gutted, they are now arresting the people trying to expose it. Let's get into this.
On May 9th, Newark Mayor Ross Baraka was arrested outside an ICE detention facility while supporting members of Congress during an official oversight visit. He was outside the gate, cameras were rolling, and they cuffed him anyways.
Did you see today that they said that they were invited? And they were, yes, so I don't remember where I saw it, but they said that they were invited by ICE to tour the facility. They were in the process of getting them like through the gate to go in when something else happened. Like someone started, I guess, created the chaotic situation that caused everything to break loose. But yes, they weren't there without permission.
Apparently, it was also like against the law that it even opened because it was a private prison.
Yes.
So.
And they still have to follow health codes and stuff.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I saw that today and I meant to tell you about it and I just forgot because it's busy. But anyway, so these ICE agents apparently shoved some members of Congress. Over 20 armed officers showed up. Congressman Bonnie Watson Coleman called it un-American. Senator Cory Booker, who is currently on my shit list, called it intimidation.
Yeah, mine too. And here's the kicker. The detention center had reopened as a private for-profit prison in defiance of local law. But instead of being held accountable, ICE used federal muscle to silence and arrest the people asking questions.
While they have dropped the charges on Mayor Ross Baraka, they have arrested Rep. LaMonica McIver and will be charging her for assaulting ICE officers, charging her to silence her.
This is authoritarianism in broad daylight. This is what fascism looks like before the sirens.
And if you think this kind of erasure only hits protesters, politicians, or marginalized groups, think again. In April of 2025, historian Heather Cox Richardson, one of the most trusted public voices in America, was locked out of her Facebook account. No warning, no cause, no transparency.
For those who don't know her, Heather Cox Richardson isn't a radical. She's a Harvard trained historian, a tenured professor. She writes a daily newsletter, Letters from an American, that explains current events through the lens of U.S. history and constitutional law. Over 1 million people read her updates every day.
And she's the reason why I unfriended at least 3 MAGA people on my Facebook, because they had the audacity to laugh react to one of her very well articulated posts that I shared to my Facebook page. So when they laugh reacted to it, I decided to laugh react them out of my life. Literally.
As you should.
Yeah, because she doesn't rant. She doesn't post memes. She just tells the truth slowly, clearly, and with citations. I love a girl with receipts. That's why I love Jasmine Crockett. They both always bring the receipts. I'm sorry, receipts cannot be denied. And they're still trying to deny it, even when she shows up with receipts.
Well, and Melanie Stansbury in that one with Marjorie Taylor Greene literally held up the actual picture. It was a full receipt. I held it up next to her while she was talking on the public broadcast.
Embarrassed the F out of her, which I am here for.
Marjorie Taylor Greene embarrasses the F out of herself every single day.
Yeah. It's not even hard to do at this point. Like, she's a walking punchline. But you know, she does all this to just get the word out. She's a historian, but yet she was silenced. So why do we think that is? I mean, I think it's because she makes connections with people and she reminds people that history is repeating itself.
What's more dangerous to fascists than a mother with a mic? A historian with a memory.
When fascist regimes rise, they don't just burn books. They come for teachers, writers, scholars, context makers.
In Nazi Germany, university professors were fired en masse if they taught unpatriotic material. Jewish historians were purged from institutions. Librarians had to pledge loyalty to the Reich or be removed. In Franco's Spain, history books were rewritten under the Ministry of Propaganda. Only approved versions of national identity were allowed. And that sounds a lot like the English being declared the national language.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, it's just written in a different font right now, literally. 2025 America is written in a different font. Yeah. We're not burning books officially, except when we do, it's white males that check out books from a library in Ohio on inclusionary topics who decide to burn them in a bonfire because I don't know why.
Not surprised that it was Ohio by any means. I was only there for 3 years, but I am not floored.
The whole Ohio is weird thing is kind of gone away. We need to bring it back because who's burning books on inclusionary topics in 2025, the year of our Lord? Like, what in the world? But besides the random book burners, we also have people that are deplatforming anybody who tries to explain history, replacing historian with influencer. I even hate saying that word, influencers. Like, what even is that?
People that shove red pills down throats of young males.
Charlie. We're calling for the prosecution of independent journalists. And I keep seeing things where, like, the Midas Touch and other journalists are being censored, shut down. Their accounts are getting strikes on them, and they're not on the regular news. So that's how I'm getting a lot of my news right now, personally. Yeah. I don't know how you are, but I'm getting a lot of my news from YouTube from these independent journalists. So,
I get a ton. I get the podcast updates. They always cite their sources. They tell you where to go to. All of my stuff, like when I see something that I'm like, I check Ad Fontes first. And I'm like, okay, how reliable is this source? How is it opinionated? What side does it lean? And if it's central in the little green box up top, I'm like, all right, that's the source I'm going with. You know, and I might find a couple other that are up there.
I do try to look at both sides just to see how each side is spinning it.
Well, NPR and PBS spectrum are literally central.
I know, but they're acting like these crazy.
They are literally central.
And Reuters,
they're in the
too.
high fact. Reuters is up there, too. John Cornyn, I sent him a thing. It was like, I emailed the office, and I was like, don't defund PBS and NPR. And they're like, well, the radical left-leaning, da-da-da. I put NPR, PBS, and Fox News on the Ad Fontes. So that way they show up, like, where they're at. And I said, that's bullshit. I was like, that is not. Because you had these two up here right in the middle. And then you had freaking Fox News all the way at the bottom, highly opinionated and problematic on the right side. I was like, so who is...
And the insane thing about it is, like, when they were talking about these guys wanting to defund PBS,
Mhm.
a lot of them hadn't even watched PBS programming. It's like, how can
No.
you just say these buzzwords when you haven't even seen what you're trying to throw away?
We watch PBS all. Do you know how much Wild Kratts I watch in my house? I
Yeah.
love Wild Kratts. I grew up on Chris and Martin Kratt. Like, they are my favorite.
So I grew up watching Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I mean, that was where Daniel Tiger came from,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
And
because
so,
the little puppet when
yes, his little meow meow, and
yeah.
they would go to the pretend land or whatever. And I mean, I watched so much of that program. Pinwheel, there was a show called
Yeah.
Pinwheel. I
I
think
watched so much. I watched
was Reading Rainbow on there too?
Reading Rainbow was Zaboom
Yeah, I love Reading Rainbow.
There's Dragon Tales. I watched
Oh
that
yeah,
all the time. I love
Dragon
Dragon
Tales
Tales.
was more like my sister's age than mine.
Yeah. But now I have like Lila in the Loop, which my kids love, and then they love Rosie's Rolls, and they love like, and it teaches you about culture. Like
Yes,
they in
which
Rosie's
I
Roll, they
love.
have a whole special where they go to Mexico. Yeah, I don't know. We watch so much PBS. We don't even watch Sesame Street, which I know everybody's like, oh my gosh, up in arms because Elmo. Like we don't even watch Sesame Street. We'll watch it every now and then, but like there are so many things right now that are on PBS that are just incredible learning skills.
So the like puppet people kind of freaked me out. Like I never really liked things in like costumes like that.
Yeah.
Growing up, even still, I'm kind of like mascots are they kind of bug me out a little bit. So I get it. Like I could totally see where it wouldn't be as appealing to some kids, but like the lessons in there are amazing. Oh, where am I at? Historian curriculum with culture war and truth with algorithmic silence.
Heather Cox Richardson's page was eventually restored because of public pressure, but that does not undo the message it sent. Even calm, fact-based truth is now considered a threat to national narrative control.
Have you ever thought about that this podcast could get us some kind of watch list?
I'm pretty sure I'm already on a watch list.
I've thought about that. I've literally thought about that.
Clear.
Like, us just telling the truth about history is probably getting us on some kind of watch list.
I was already posted on Donald Trump for president 2025. I'm already on the watch list. My congressman posted me.
Yeah.
On the Donald Trump page.
He's weird for that. He's weird for that.
No, I'm the weird one because I brought a baby to a protest.
Yeah, I think that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard to care about because, again, you're a mother. You're going to do it. If you went and it's like, I'm a mom, they'd be like, why isn't she with her kids? If it's like, oh, why isn't she at work? Oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom. Why isn't she with her kids? And then, oh, her kids are with her. Why did you bring your kids?
That's it. That is literally it. That is
There's
the narrative.
No right answer.
If I'm not at home in my kitchen taking care of my kids, somebody's
got an issue
with it.
How dare you? How dare you teach your children to understand how democracy works? How dare you?
Okay.
And this isn't isolated. Historians are getting fired for teaching about race and gender. Libraries are losing funding.
While also holding Republican meetings.
Yes, that too. Textbooks are being stripped of civil rights content by state boards.
Because when a regime feels threatened by people who remember the past, it's already afraid of what the future might look like.
So we're saying the names: Betty Maskett, Betty McIntosh, the 6888, the Code Talkers, the Tuskegee Airmen, but we're also saying the names of the people of today, like Heather Cox Richardson, because if the truth tellers get silenced, we lose the memory and the momentum. This isn't chaos. This is a pattern. Remove the photos, scrub the websites, kick the soldiers out, arrest the oversight, shut the historians up.
This is memory warfare, and the casualties are real because when history is erased, so are the people who made it.
So here's our news spotlight. It's not a headline, it is a red flag.
When they erase women, queer folks, Native heroes, Black battalions, and elected officials, they are not cleaning house. They're clearing the stage for something darker.
And we are not going to go quietly.
Dear America, my son is 2. He loves dinosaurs, hates bedtime, and thinks the word fascist means a kind of pasta. But one day he'll learn what it really means, and I need to be able to look him in the eye and say, when it came back, I did not stay quiet.
Dear America, my daughter just turned 19. She's trying to figure out what her future looks like, if there even is one, because her history classes are cutting out the words Jim Crow and her rights are being debated on the evening news like they're an option. But she still shows up. She's going to become a voter registrar. She reads banned books, and I will stand behind her until they try to erase me too.
Dear America, you were built on protest, you were born on rebellion. And now you are slipping, not because of revolution, but because of complacency, because too many people are afraid to be divisive, because we were told to stay neutral while our neighbors disappeared. But silence and neutrality in the face of fascism is just a slower form of surrender.
To every mother who has ever packed lunches while reading about detention camps, to every teacher who has slid a censored paragraph back into a student's hands, to every teenager who was on the school newspaper and whispered history in the hallway, this is for you. You are not imagining it, you are not overreacting, and you are not alone.
So what now?
Well, you speak up, you show out, you show up, you interrupt dinner, you say the names that they're trying to delete, you flood your school board meetings, you write your damn textbook if you have to.
Call your rep, email your school district, donate to your local librarian's legal fund. Post the quote, especially when your uncle unfriends you.
And when your kid asks what you did when history started disappearing, you better have an answer.
We started a podcast.
Yes.
And a page,
and a political page against our douchebag of a representative.
This has been Moms Against the Machine, where we dig up the past to fight for the future. Find us on Moms and Machines on TikTok and Moms Against the Machine on Insta and Facebook.
We're not radical left liberals. We're not pundits. We're just moms with dirty Volkswagen Atlases, which, by the way, how funny that we met each other and we drive the same car. And our sons are the same name. So we have our busted laptops that have to restart 3 times before we can get through a whole episode sometimes. But we also have way too much to lose.
And we see what's happening. The erasure, the silencing, the staged forgetting. But here's the thing. Memory is a form of resistance.
So the cat's like, yes, I agree.
Get off.
Please come cuddle me. But we are writing down and saying the names, and we're going to scream the truth, because even if they burn the archives, they will never silence the living history out of our mouths.
This is not over. This is just the beginning. And to the machine,
you don't get to write the ending.